When people think about World War II, they imagine steel and fire, tanks pushing through smoke, bombers cutting across the sky, armies colliding in fields, cities, deserts, and oceans. But inside that war was another one, quieter and just as decisive. A war of broken radios, delayed messages, misunderstood orders, wrong frequencies, fog, static, and silence. You could call it the War of Misheard Orders. And if you want a fresh angle on World War II that does not feel like the same documentary everyone has already seen, this is it. Because in modern war, a plan is only as strong as the signal that carries it. World War II was the first truly fast global war of the modern age. Not just because of tanks and aircraft, but because armies were now expected to move and adapt at speed. A breakthrough could happen in hours. A city could be surrounded in a day. A fleet could be destroyed in a single morning. That speed made communication a weapon. And it also made communication failure a hidden killer. If a commander cannot reach the front line becomes a blind fist swinging in the dark. If a unit does not receive a withdrawal order in time, it may fight until it is encircled. If an air force cannot coordinate with ground troops, bombs may fall on the wrong target. And even when the order is delivered, war introduces another danger. The order is understood differently by different people, under pressure, exhaustion, fear, and chaos. A simple phrase, like advance to the river, can become 3 different actions, depending on who hears it and when. To see how powerful communication can be, start with a contrast. In 1940, Germany shocked Europe with speed. Part of that shock came from doctrine and daring, but part of it came from something less dramatic. Radios. German armored units relied heavily on radio coordination to move fast, adjust quickly, and exploit gaps. The faster you can talk, the faster you can break your enemy's rhythm. Many of their opponents still depended too much on slower, more rigid methods of coordination. This is not the whole explanation of 1940, but it reveals something important. In World War II, better communication was not just a supporting advantage, it was a form of power. Now flip that coin. Because the same war that rewarded good communication punished weak communication with brutal efficiency. One of the clearest examples of a plan colliding with communication reality came in September 1944. Operation Market Garden. The concept was bold. Airborne forces would seize a chain of key bridges. Ground forces would race along a narrow corridor. If everything worked, the Allies might cross the Rhine quickly and potentially shorten the war in Europe. But airborne warfare is a gamble even in perfect conditions. Troops land scattered. Equipment drops in the wrong fields. Enemy response is unpredictable. And all of it depends on coordination across distance. In Market Garden, the battlefield became a maze of fragmented units. IDO sets had limited range. Terrain and buildings interfered with signals. Some equipment was damaged or lost. Some units struggled to synchronize frequencies under pressure. The result was confusion multiplying over time. Local commanders fought heroically, but often without a complete picture. Requests for support arrived late or not at all. Plans for linking up with ground forces became uncertain. A bold operation began to fracture into pockets of isolated resistance. Market Garden did not fail because of one broken radio. It failed because modern warfare is a system, and when the system weakens, even bravery cannot stitch the whole plan back together. Now zoom out to the largest battlefield of all, the Pacific. Here, communication was not just important, it was everything. In the Pacific, distance was a weapon. A fleet might be hundreds of miles from the nearest friendly base. Carrier warfare depended on scouting, timing, and coordination at speeds the world had never seen before. A single delayed report could mean that a strike launched too late. A single misread enemy position could mean that aircraft found empty ocean, while the enemy found them. In 1942, the Battle of Midway showed how the war was turning into a battle of information and timing. Midway is famous for code breaking, and that story deserves its reputation. But inside the battle itself, The technical and human layers of communication mattered too. Early warning, air defense coordination, scouting reports, and the ability to react to sudden changes all shaped the outcome. Carrier battles were not won only in the air. They were won in the chain of information connecting radar, radio, pilots, commanders, and decision rooms. If that chain was slower for one side, even by minutes, the price could be catastrophic. But communication failure was not always accidental. Sometimes it was engineered. In fact, one of the most sophisticated uses of communication in World War II was not about speaking clearly. It was about making your enemy hear the wrong story. Before the Normandy invasion, the Allies built one of the most successful deception campaigns in military history. They created false units, false movements, false intentions. But the most powerful part was not what Germany saw. It was what Germany believed it heard. Fake radio traffic helped construct an imaginary threat and reinforce the idea that the main invasion might strike elsewhere. This was a different kind of battlefield, not a battlefield of bullets, but of belief. And it shows another truth about World War II. Communication was not just about connecting your army. It was also about infiltrating your enemy's mind. Now move to the Eastern Front, where the scale of war took communication problems to an almost impossible level. Millions of soldiers, a front stretching for thousands of kilometers, cities turned into ruins, forests, rivers, snow, mud. If there is any place where the fog of war was a physical reality, it was here. In fast-moving operations, orders often traveled through chaos. A headquarters might believe a unit was still holding a position, when that unit had already been forced to retreat. A commander might order an advance based on a map that no longer matched reality. A breakthrough might occur before higher command even fully understood that the enemy line had fractured. Communication gaps could create simultaneous wars. The war commanders thought they were fighting, and the war soldiers were actually living. This mismatch was deadly. It could lead to units being sent into positions that no longer existed. It could leave flanks exposed. It could turn a planned withdrawal into a chaotic rout, or an organized defense into an accidental encirclement. The Eastern Front was a battlefield where decisions were sometimes made with the truth arriving hours too late. In the air, the same pattern appeared. World War II required coordination between ground forces and air forces on an enormous scale. But friendly coordination was not automatic. Different branches had different priorities. Different commanders spoke different operational languages. Different systems sometimes did not connect smoothly. In major offensives, even small communication mistakes could be amplified by the speed of airstrikes. A target grid misunderstood. A frontline position not updated. A smoke marker misread through dust and chaos. These were not just technical errors. They were human errors in a war that demanded near-perfect synchronization from people operating under extreme stress. So what do all these moments have in common? They reveal that World War II was not only a contest of weapons, it was a contest of systems. A system is only as strong as its weakest link. If radar detects the enemy, but the warning is not passed fast enough, the advantage evaporates. If a commander gives a clear order, but the radio fails at the wrong second, the battlefield may drift into chaos. If a unit hears an order, but interprets it in a different way than the broader plan requires, an entire operation can twist out of shape. And if your enemy can convince you that the battlefield is somewhere else entirely, you may deploy your strength in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the deeper reason your topic is so strong, because it forces viewers to rethink what power means in World War II. We often describe the war as a clash of giants and machines, but this lens shows something more fragile and more human. War is also about whether people can understand each other through noise, distance, fear, and speed. Sometimes history turned not on the size of an army, but on whether a single message arrived in time. And that brings us back to the question your title implies. How did communication errors change World War II? They changed it in three big ways. First, they shaped the difference between collapse and control. Germany's early successes were boosted by effective communication. inside fast-moving combined arms operations. But later in the war, as fronts expanded and resources thinned, the complexity of staying coordinated grew. Second, they turned ambitious plans into fragile bets. Operations like major airborne assaults were brilliant on paper, but dangerously sensitive to breakdowns in coordination. Third, they allowed deception to become a strategic weapon. World War II was one of the great ages of false signals and false realities, where leaders sometimes made decisions based on the story their enemy wanted them to believe. If you want to end this kind of video with impact, you do not need to list dozens of battles. You just need to leave the viewer with one unforgettable truth. In World War II, the loudest explosions were not always the decisive moments. Sometimes the decisive moment was silence, a radio that stayed dead, a message that never arrived, a unit that waited for orders that were already outdated by the time they were spoken. The war of misheard orders reminds us that history is not only shaped by the people who had the strongest weapons, it is also shaped by the people who could connect thought to action faster, who could keep command and reality aligned, and who could rebuild order when the battlefield turned into noise. Because in the end, a war of machines is still a war of humans. Humans who must communicate, humans who must decide, humans who must act. And in World War II, the difference between victory and disaster was sometimes no bigger than a voice cracking over a radio and a single sentence heard the wrong way at the worst possible moment.